Nearly 8 weeks ago, the Edmonton Oilers were awarded the 8th overall pick in the draft lottery for the upcoming 2019 NHL Draft on June 21st and 22nd in Vancouver. Now the Edmonton Oilers and their brass are here in the heart of Buffalo, New York for the 2019 NHL Scouting Combine. Tony Brar here alongside Jack Michaels, Bob Stauffer, and Edmonton Oilers Director of Player Personnel, Bob Green. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Bob, just maybe outline what this weekend looks like for you and what the primary goal is for you guys here.
Well, the primary goal is to come and get to know these kids face to face, and we've watched them play for 7 months, and we know what they are as players now, and we're trying to get to know what they are as people.
Bob, as Tony mentioned, you've got the 8th, but also the 38th pick. So there's a decent chance you might be sitting down with your first 2 picks. What sorts of attributes are you looking for since there's no on-ice component?
Well, really, just to get to know the kids. You ask them some questions about some things you saw during the course of the season, and you get their reactions. You kind of get a read on what their answers are and how they react to certain questions, that type of thing. But really, it's just to put a face to the player that you've been watching and really try to get comfortable with them.
Would you throw a curveball in there?
The odd one. I think they probably all see the same questions coming.
We hear about them. That's why I asked.
We don't ask them anything too silly.
This is an interesting year in the sense that there's a run on maybe 5 U.S. National Development Program forwards that are probably going to go in the top 10 or 11, and 3 WHL forwards that could be potentially going in the top, say, 10 or 11. How challenging is it from an analytics perspective to gauge a group of guys that have played on a stacked team versus 3 individuals that have, maybe not played on as good of teams? I mean, from an evaluation process, how do you guys sort of deal with something like that?
Well, it's tough, but there's enough history with the National Development Program where there's enough data, from years prior where you kind of measure those kids, against the Matthews and the guys before them, and that helps a little bit more. Than it's really tough. The 2 different leagues, they play a lot of international games. They play in the USHL. The CHL is a different thing altogether. So that's basically, how we do it.
Bob talked about the strength of the U.S. National Development Team, but what about the strength of this draft class as a whole? What positions do you see are maybe stronger than others, and how does it compare to past draft classes?
Well, looking at certain points of the draft, I think it's maybe a little bit stronger the forward position than it is at D, but then you go a little bit later and it changes, So I think there's good forwards, there's good D, there's some good goaltenders. So I think it just depends on what everybody's looking at and where some of these kids fall.
Sorry, Jack. How does that maybe present a challenge in terms of the age-old question: best player available or draft based on team needs?
Well, I think you always take the best player available. It's really tough to pass up on a guy that's going to be a real good player just to fill a need somewhere else, But as you get through the draft, you kind of look at everything, and it may change. And if 2 kids are fairly close, then maybe you look at the positional need rather as a tiebreaker, so to speak.
When you arrive at this kind of deal, Bob, how wide is your net? Again, because of where you're drafting, are you looking to talk to as many kids as possible, or do you have groups that you think will be there at 8, groups that you think will be there at 38, and try to narrow it down a bit to get to know the kid maybe a smidge better?
Oh, a little of both. We're talking to around 85 kids this week, which is a lot, but I think it's important, especially in the later round picks, that you talk to these guys. You got to get to know them as well. And but there's groups of kids that we know are going to be gathered around our pick at 8, and then there's another group of kids that we feel are going to be close to 38. So when those kids come in the room, we may dig in a little bit harder on it, knowing that those are critical picks for us.
Bob, Ken Holland came aboard in the last month here, and Detroit has 6 and 36, so somewhat similar picks in the opening couple rounds. Just a thought, you don't have to share everything, but is there any changes in the philosophical approach for maybe what your group had since Ken's arrived in terms of what you're targeting?
Well, traditionally at the draft, I mean, we talked about best player available, and I think that's pretty similar to all groups, and he's come in and he's seen, he sees the national development team play a lot, and so he's giving his opinions and some things, and throwing some information into the conversations too, which has helped, and it always does. The more you get, the better off you are. So, it's been good that way. But from the traditional draft process of taking the best player available, there's no change there.
Bob, you mentioned you have 85 interviews. We appreciate you scratching one off your list this morning here with Oilers TV. Oilers TV and EdmontonOilers.com will have you covered throughout the 2019 NHL Scouting Combine here in Buffalo, New York.